Hola amigos, Ghost here, and today we end our bonus bookend series on Ghost of Tsushima. To conclude this series, today's final bookends is a special one. Today, we shall tell the life story of one of the most famous Japanese samurai to ever exist, Minamoto Yoshitsune. His story was a vital part in the transformation of Japan from a state ruled solely by the emperors to one ruled by samurai shoguns. His feats as a warrior leader, exaggerated or not, paved the foundation of the romanticized myth of the samurai, and his life inspired directly or indirectly countless stories in modern media, from movies and TV to novels and comics. Many video games too include Yoshitsune himself, his story, or a reimagined tale of it. Ghost of Tsushima, I believe, took inspiration from Yoshitsune's story to create Jin Sakai and his story. A reimagining of what Yoshitsune's life would have been like if he had faced the Mongols. I believe that Yoshitsune's life is mirrored by Jin's. So once Yoshitsune's story is told, we shall compare their stories and see how much they have in common. With that, let's return to the past one final time. Let's do this! In the year of 1159, Yoshitsune was born in Kyoto, Japan. His mother, Tokiwa Gozen, was claimed to be the most beautiful woman in all of Japan. She was compassionate and caring. His father, Minamoto Yoshitomo, was the head of the Minamoto clan. He was a skilled warrior and highly ambitious. The Minamoto were one of the most powerful samurai clans in the country, only rivaled by the Taira. Just prior to his birth, his father helped the retired emperor Go-Shirakawa win an imperial succession crisis in 1156. For helping put down that Hojin rebellion, he was rewarded a title. This title, however, was meaningless compared to the one his rival Taira Kiyomori received. This insult, along with the convincing schemes of Fujiwara Nobuyori, led to Yoshitomo kidnapping the retired emperor in 1160. He chased power, but he had unknowingly changed the fate of his many sons, most of all, the newborn Yoshitsune. This Heiji rebellion was crushed by Taira Kiyomori within the streets of Kyoto. Yoshitsune's oldest half-brother was killed in the fighting. His father and another half-brother fled east, but were betrayed and killed by a retainer who saw which way the wind was blowing. Tokiwa fled Kyoto with Yoshitsune bundled to her chest, and her other two sons holding tight to her robes. They fled through ice and snow. They found safety, but it was fleeting, as her family was captured. She was forced to return to Kyoto with her children. She begged for their lives, and if they must die, that she go first. Kiyomori spared them, and a few other half-brothers as well. Kiyomori wouldn't live long enough to see the mistake this mercy did. Little is known about Yoshitsune's early life between the years of 1160 and 1174. What is known is that his brothers were sent to temples to become monks. His mother would become Kiyomori's mistress, and that he lived within Kiyomori's household. At the age of 7, he was sent to the Kurama temple, north of Kyoto, to be trained as a monk. He would never see his mother again. She would eventually escape Kiyomori by marrying into the Fujiwara clan before dying in 1180. During his time at Kurama, Yoshitsune was very energetic. He grew up listening to stories about the Minamoto and Taira, about his father, grandfather, and his ancestors. He longed to forge his own story. Meanwhile, The Taira continued to gain more and more power as Kiyomori was named Chancellor in 1167 and his daughter married the reigning emperor in 1171, though true power still laid with the retired emperor for now. As Yoshitsune's 15th birthday approached, he was expected to become a monk. Instead, he escaped. In the spring of 1174, a merchant that was friends of the Minamoto arrived at the temple to do trade. Yoshitsune took this opportunity to escape. The merchant helped him by disguising him as the merchant's servant. For several months, they traveled across central and eastern Japan until they reached the city of Hiraizumi. This city was at the edge of the government's power. It was a beautiful and rich place, ruled by a branch of the Fujiwara clan, with Fujiwara Hidehira at its head. Hidehira welcomed Yoshitsune into his home and treated him like a son. Yoshitsune began to be trained in the ways of the samurai. He would learn to master the bow, horse riding, horse archery, and finally the sword. During his training, he became close friends with the samurai brothers Tadanobu and Sujinobu. From the summer of 1174 to the summer of 1180, Yoshitsune trained at the edge of Japan's world, while the rest of Japan grew closer to civil war. Kiyomori's ambitions grew. He sought the imperial throne for his family, and in 1178 he would gain his opportunity. A son was born between Kiyomori's daughter and the reigning emperor. Between late 1179 and early 1180, Kiyomori imprisoned Goshirakawa and put his grandson Antoku on the throne. These actions started a war between the imperially backed Minamoto and the usurper Taira. The Genpei War had begun. Minamoto Yoritomo, Yoshitsune's half-brother, declared himself the defender of the imperial family. He established his power base in the town of Kamakura and gathered allies for the war. Yoshitsune heard this call. He had to go. In the fall of 1180, the 21-year-old left Hiraizumi, disobeying his adoptive father. Hidehira, regretting this, ordered the samurai brothers to join Yoshitsune and protect him. At the end of autumn, the three young samurai reached Yoritomo's base. The two half-brothers met for the first time in their lives. They couldn't be more different. Yoritomo was a cold, calculating politician and patient leader. Yoshitsune was highly energetic and prideful, full of heroic ambition and a risk-taking warrior. Despite their differences, they got along well enough. The Minamoto were reunited. Meanwhile, the Taira suffered a huge blow as Kiyomori fell ill and died within months of the Minamoto brothers meeting. His son, Munimori, would take charge of the Taira. A period of inaction ensued. Between 1181 and 1183, Yoshitsune continued to improve his skills as he waited impatiently to march against the Taira. During this time, another half-brother, Minamoto Noriyori, joined them at Kamakura. Noriyori and Yoshitsune competed for Yoritomo's attention and favor. An 1182 incident involving a shrine ceremony sparked the first disobedience by Yoshitsune. Although it was resolved, Yoritomo never forgot this. The stalemate between the Taira and Minamoto ended in the second half of 1183. The Taira targeted Minamoto Yoshinaka, cousin of the Minamoto brothers, who controlled forces in the northeast. Yoshinaka crushed the Taira and eventually marched on Kyoto, capturing it and freeing the retired emperor. However, Yoshinaka was an incompetent tyrant. one that Yoritomo had to deal with. In the first month of 1184, Yoritomo divided his army in two, giving Yoshitsune and Noriyori equal command. Yoshitsune led 3,000 men out of Kamakura. The two forces marched toward Kyoto for 3 weeks, using two different routes. The Uji River blocked their path to Kyoto. Its northern Seta Bridge and southern Uji Bridge were the only ways forward. Noriyori would march on the Seta and Yoshitsune the Uji. On the winter morning of February 19th, 1184, the battle for Uji River began as the Minamoto approached the contested bridges. Yoshinaka had torn down the bridges and set up deadly obstacles within the only fordable parts of the river. Yoshitsune consulted with his men for a plan, something that samurai leaders rarely did. The men respected him for this, and one volunteered to cross the river to test for a way forward. Quickly, many others joined, all wanting to be the first across. Yoshitsune and 500 of his men charged across the river. A storm of arrows struck the horsemen, and yet they were undeterred. Reaching the other side, Yoshitsune's force returned fire. Immediately, the enemy broke and fled the field. Up north, a similar event occurred with Noriyori's force. By the day's end, the Minamoto were closing in on Kyoto. Yoshinaka panicked and fled Kyoto with his most loyal forces. But the Minamoto caught up, and Yoshinaka was killed. Kyoto and Goshiwakawa were free. Arriving in Kyoto, Yoshitsune was the first to meet Goshiwakawa and gain the honor of victory. For 9 days, Yoshitsune and the Minamoto stayed in Kyoto, waiting to march against the Taira in the southwest. During his stay, Yoshitsune was gifted a mansion in Kyoto and lands from Yoritomo. The retired emperor gave to Yoshitsune a grand horse saddle and a new horse which he named Tayuguro, or Black Captain. Along with this, Yoshitsune gained two new companions, Issei Saburo and Benkei. Saburo was a mountain bandit in his past. Benkei was a ferocious warrior monk. It was said that Benkei was on a personal quest to take 1,000 swords from unworthy warriors. At 999 swords, Benkei met a young warrior at the shrine near Gojo Bridge. Benkei challenged him, and at Gojo Bridge they dueled. Benkei lost to the young warrior, who was Yoshitsune. After a second duel days later, Benkei joined Yoshitsune. After the 9 days were up, the Minamoto were on the move, and once again the Minamoto brothers split up to reach their destination, Ichi-no-Tani. During the Minamoto infighting with Yoshinaka, the Taira fortified a strong position along the Setsu coast. This fortress was protected from the north by mountains and steep bluffs, a river and a barricade called Ikuta no Mori to its east, and the ocean to its south. The Taira numbered 20,000 and had its navy along the coast. The Minamoto numbered no more than 7,000. Noriyori marched along the coast and would attack from the east. Yoshitsune marched along the mountains and would attack from the thin beaches in the west. 6 days after leaving Kyoto, Yoshitsune's force encountered a strong Taira force encamped in the mountains. After consulting with his men again, they planned a night attack. The Taira left their guards down, not suspecting such a tactic. To the samurai, night raids and attacks, deception and brutality were all acceptable tactics. Only fools let their guard down. Yoshitsune and his force charged through 9 miles of trees, fields, and farms, but not in darkness. They set the trees, the fields, and people's homes on fire to light their way. In Kyoto, Yoshitsune was civil with the people, but here He acted like any other samurai. The common people had no more rights than an ox to them. The night attack was deadly. Taira died in the hundreds. The survivors fled to the fortress. That same day, Noriyori encamped his force close to the fortress. Next morning, Yoshitsune divided his 3,000-strong force. The vast majority would attack from the beach, while Yoshitsune, his companions, and a hand-picked force would attack from the steep slopes behind the fortress. Everyone believed the Hyodoriji cliffs impassable. By the end of the day, Yoshitsune's beach force encamped in position for the battle. Meanwhile, Yoshitsune added a new companion to his force, a hunter named Washino, that guided the group to the cliffs. The cliffs indeed looked impossible to descend, but Yoshitsune remained confident. Tomorrow, he would make himself a legend. On March 20th, 1184, the Battle of Ichi-no-Tani began. At daybreak, Noriyori's force attacked the Ikuta no Mori, followed by Yoshitsune's beach force attacking the fortress itself. The Tyrant defenses were strong. Many Minamoto were slain. With all sides committed to the battle, Yoshitsune launched his insanely daring attack. Yoshitsune was the first to plunge over the cliff's edge. The 30 warriors rushed down the slope. Their bodies leaned back so far they nearly touched their horses' tails, all to avoid tumbling over. Many rode with their eyes closed. They fell into the fortress uncontested and burned it to the ground. The winds from the sea spread the raging fires further. The Taira panicked and fled their fortifications. The battle spilled into the beaches. The Taira were outmatched. Those at Ikuta no Mori saw what was happening. Morale broke, and then Noriyori breached the Taira's defenses. The Taira were routed. Taira Munimori and many others escaped to their fleet. But some ships sank, overcome by the sheer weight of the routed. Those left stranded were massacred. Few escaped into the mountains. The battle was over. After the battle, the Taira retreated to their power bases, Dan-no-Ura and Yashima. Yoshitsune returned to Kyoto victorious and was gifted the title of Chief Deputy of Kyoto. To add to his fortune, he met Shizuka, the most famous dancer in Japan. They became lovers instantly. But not all was great. Yoritomo handed out more titles and rewards to many for the battle. Yoshitsune received nothing. Was Yoritomo jealous? Felt threatened? Setting a trap? It's unknown, but Goshirakawa took this chance to award Yoshitsune the title of Junior Lieutenant of the Outer Palace Guards, a special honor he accepted without telling Yoritomo. This was a big no-no for Yoritomo as it undermined his leadership. He stripped Yoshitsune of his military command and gave full command to Noriyori. Along with this, Yoshitsune was forced to marry one of Yoritomo's retainers' daughters, effectively making Shizuka his mistress. Yoshitsune was stuck in Kyoto, but not for long. The power bases of the Taira were tough nuts to crack. Dan-no-Ura was the straits that separated Kyushu and Honshu. Yashima was the island just off the coast of Shikoku Island. If these bases fell, so too would the Taira. Noriyori believed Dan-no-Ura would be easier to take, but his campaign to reach it failed due to severe logistical problems. Noriyori's incompetence frustrated Yoritomo. Yoshitsune was soon reinstated, but would be advised by Kajiwara Kagitoki, Yoritomo's right-hand man. In the first months of 1185, Yoshitsune marched 3,000 warriors out of Kyoto. Their destination, a harbor along the inland sea. By March, Yoshitsune's force was nearly ready to cross the inland sea, land on Shikoku, and attack Yashima by land. The Minamoto's allies gave him 200 boats to transport his army. However, the weather became worse and worse, the winds stronger and storms more frequent. Kagitoki suggested adding reverse oars to the boats to help combat the chaotic winds. Yoshitsune mocked Kagitoki for the idea of going backwards. This incident gave Kagitoki his first reason to hate Yoshitsune. With the weather worsening, only 5 boats and 150 men joined Yoshitsune when they set sail for Shikoku. They would have to race for Shikoku with wild winds at their backs. On March 21st, 1185, Yoshitsune crossed the inland sea. Fortunately for him, the weather calmed, and what would have taken 3 days to cross took only 6 hours. Reaching the shore, his force routed a Tyrant detachment with the help of the Taira's allies defecting to Yoshitsune's side. With these new allies and guides, the force reached the waist-deep strait between Yashima and Shikoku and crossed into the island by nightfall. The following morning would add another chapter to Yoshitsune's legend. The 22nd of March, 1185 marked the Battle of Yashima. Yoshitsune's force lit bonfires in the night and houses on fire in the morning, fooling the Taira into believing the Minamoto had landed behind them. The Taira never expected a land attack. The Taira withdrew to their fleet, taking with them the Emperor and the Imperial regalia. With their fortress abandoned, the samurai brothers burned the fortress to the ground. Realizing that they were tricked, Taira forces returned to shore but stayed on their boats. Both sides mocked each other before Taira Norisune, who lost 2 brothers at Ichi-no-Tani, fired an arrow at Yoshitsune. Sujinobu took the arrow for his friend. It pierced his left shoulder and drove all the way through it. He fell from his horse. He lay dying on the sand. Norisune continued firing but never landed another hit. His servant rushed to take Sujinobu's head, but Tadanobu mortally wounded the servant. Sujinobu and the servant both died that day. Both sides pulled back. Eventually, the Taira challenged the Minamoto to knock off a fan atop a pole from a boat some few hundred feet from shore. A young archer nailed the shot. Both sides applauded the archer's skill. Then, another arrow was fired, killing a Taira warrior dancing on the same boat. This planned second shot enraged the Taira, and hundreds of them returned to shore to fight. But a cavalry charge crushed them. With that, the Taira left Yashima behind. The Minamoto were victorious, but at a personal cost to Yoshitsune. Sujinobu would be buried, and a monk was gifted Yoshitsune's prized horse and saddle in exchange for the soothing of his friend's soul. A few days later, Kagitoki and the rest of the army arrived to help. Yoshitsune, still saddened by his friend's death, mocked Kagitoki, calling him useless. Kagitoki added a second reason to hate Yoshitsune. With Yashima captured, all eyes turned to Dan-no-Ura. The Minamoto gathered every ally, resource, and boat they could. The Taira, skilled sailors, would be in their element. The Minamoto would be disadvantaged. The final battle of the Genpei War approached, the Battle of Dan-no-Ura. 1 month after Yashima, on April 25th, Yoshitsune's fleet of about 800 ragtag ships and boats approached Dan-no-Ura. Taira Munimori awaited their arrival with his fleet of 500 ships. Both sides used similar-sized boats, but the Taira had several large Chinese-style ships that were superior to everything else. Both sides numbered roughly 4,000 warriors. The Child Emperor and the Imperial Regalia were somewhere among the Taira fleet. The Taira positioned themselves at the narrowest section of the strait, knowing the morning tides would give them the advantage in speed and maneuverability. As the Minamoto approached, Kagitoki and Yoshitsune got into an argument of who should lead the attack. They nearly fought each other over it. A third reason for Kagitoki's hate. The first action of the day, ironically, occurred near the shore as Kagitoki's vessel used weaker tides to strike a lone Taira ship. This small victory meant nothing for the Taira. They focused their efforts in destroying Yoshitsune. The Taira charged forward, firing volleys of arrows from their decks. Vessels crashed into one another. Many became battlegrounds for control over individual ships. The Taira and the tide pushed the Minamoto closer and closer to the rocky shores of Honshu's coast. The Minamoto buckled under the pressure, but they did not break. Yoshitsune inspired the men to keep fighting. A Taira ally's son was captured, and his father quickly switched sides. He told Yoshitsune that the Chinese ships were bait. The Taira leaders were in the ships around them instead. Yoshitsune had his target, and it was at this moment when the tide slowed, then stopped, and finally turned. The tide's shift halted the Taira's advance. The Minamoto were free to counterattack. Yoshitsune ordered all archers to fire at the rowers and helmsmen of Taira leaders' boats. Taira allies changed allegiances and attacked the Taira. It was over for the Taira. With defeat ensured, hundreds upon hundreds of Taira jumped into a watery grave. Kiyomori's widow took the child Emperor Antoku and the imperial sword and jumped into the hungry sea. Munimori and his son tried the same, but they were captured along with the remaining imperial regalia. Norisune refused to die until Yoshitsune was killed. He zigzagged through ships until he finally found Yoshitsune, but there would be no duel. Yoshitsune simply jumped onto a passing ship. Norisune went berserk, fighting several samurai at once before taking one with him into the sea. The battle was over. The Taira were virtually wiped out. The Genpei War was concluded with the Minamoto's victory, thanks in large part to Yoshitsune. Yoritomo was now the most powerful samurai in Japan. Word of the victory was sent to Yoritomo and Goshirakawa. The retired emperor praised Yoshitsune immediately and waited several days before doing the same for Yoritomo. Yoritomo kept note of this. Yoshitsune would travel back to Kyoto with the Taira prisoners. Across his journey, Yoshitsune was celebrated by samurai and commoner alike. But in the shadows, rumors and lies were spread. Kagitoki sent a letter to Yoritomo about Yoshitsune's arrogance, ego, and disobedience. Noriyori sent one claiming that Yoshitsune tried to govern Kyushu in spite of Yoritomo's orders. Yoritomo became more and more suspicious of Yoshitsune. More fuel to this fire of distrust came when Yoshitsune returned to Kyoto. During the ceremony of the Imperial Regalia's restoration, Yoshitsune wore his junior lieutenant uniform under his armor. More disrespect in Yoritomo's eyes. Yoshitsune tried to reconcile the vile rumors by sending his own letter reaffirming his loyalty, but this only added more fuel to the fire. Once more, Yoritomo stripped Yoshitsune of his military command. Once more, Yoshitsune was stuck in Kyoto. Eventually, Yoshitsune was ordered to bring the Tyrant to Kamakura. Yoshitsune hoped he could repair his relationship with his brother, but this would never happen. When they arrived near Kamakura, the prisoners were granted an audience with Yoritomo. Yoshitsune was not. 8 days passed before Yoshitsune sent a letter hoping to mend their relationship. Yoritomo never responded. After 25 days of waiting, Yoritomo gave Yoshitsune new orders. Return to Kyoto and execute the prisoners on the journey there. Yoshitsune and his companions obeyed and left for Kyoto. A few miles outside of Kyoto, they executed Munimori and his son, taking their heads to the prison gate of the city. Returning to Kyoto, Yoshitsune learned his lands and wealth were confiscated. Only his home remained. Yoritomo wanted Yoshitsune to rebel from this, but he didn't. Whether it was loyalty to the family, love for his brother, or advice from his allies. In August 1185, Kagitoki's son delivered an order to Yoshitsune. Although potentially suffering from illness, Yoshitsune was ordered to kill their uncle Yuki-e to prove his loyalty to Yoritomo. Their uncle had served Yoshinaka before defecting to Yoritomo's side. Now Yoritomo suspected treachery and saw the potential to kill 2 family members with one sword. Yoshitsune agreed to the order, but only after he recovered from his illness. Yoritomo believed Yoshitsune was faking illness to buy time. The decision to kill his half-brother was made. Assassins were gathered. In October 1185, Yoritomo's retainer, a warrior monk named Tosabu Shojun, arrived into the city. He spoke with Yoshitsune before retiring to his residence. Yoshitsune sent 2 boy servants to spy on the monk. They were found dead by a female servant in front of Shojun's residence. The writing was on the wall. With his companions and loyal warriors, Yoshitsune charged out of his home and attacked the unsuspecting assassins. The surprise attack killed most of the would-be assassins. Shojun fled to Kumaura Temple, where he was immediately captured and given to Yoshitsune to be killed. The situation escalated quickly. Goshiwakawa gives Yoshitsune the imperial mandate to kill Yoritomo. Yoritomo gathers his army. Kagitoki marched a force toward Kyoto, and Yoshitsune and his uncle joined forces. But there would be no second civil war. Yoshitsune and his uncle were hopelessly outnumbered. Their only chance was to flee to Shikoku to gather an army there. On November 3rd, 1185, Yoshitsune, his uncle, his companions, and his lover left Kyoto quietly. 3 days later, they reached a harbor and sailed to Shikoku. Severe weather wrecked their ships. Yoshitsune and his group were some of the few survivors. They had no choice but to go into hiding. Uncle Yuki-e had split up from Yoshitsune and would be killed months later. Yoshitsune and Co. would hide in the snowy wilds of the Yoshino Mountains. 9 days later, Yoshitsune sent Shizuka to Kyoto, believing she would be spared due to her fame. Unknowingly to him, she was carrying his child. Meanwhile, Yoritomo was leading his army out of Kamakura when he heard of the news. He promptly returned home. Yoritomo stripped lands and titles from all those who supported or had supported Yoshitsune. He forced Goshiwakawa to issue an imperial edict calling Yoshitsune public enemy number 1. And with Yoshitsune's fate unknown, Yoritomo tightened his control over Japan. Shortly after her return to Kyoto, Shizuka would be captured and held in captivity before being sent to Kamakura several months later. Her pregnancy was obvious to all. She feared the fate of her child. Yoritomo would force her to dance in the spring of 1186 despite her pregnancy. Her dance that day was unforgettable. She mocked Yoritomo with Yoshitsune's escape. Yoritomo was furious, but it did not matter. If her child was a boy, the boy would be killed. If it was a daughter, the daughter would be a maid in his household. From the winter of 1185 to the spring of 1187, little was known of Yoshitsune's whereabouts. It's most likely he and his companions hid in the mountains of central Japan and disguised themselves as Yamabushi, monks that carried weapons. One tale of this time had Tadanobu wear Yoshitsune's armor to distract a search party while the others escaped. He defeated the pursuers but was forced to return to Kyoto. Regardless of this tale's truth, Tadanobu did return to Kyoto and he would die fighting Yoritomo's men in September of 1186. Another tale had Yoshitsune and Benkei fool a government checkpoint into believing Yoshitsune just looked like Yoshitsune but wasn't actually him. Back in Kamakura, Shizuka gave birth to a boy. The son of Yoshitsune was drowned in the sea. Shizuka was allowed to retire to a Buddhist nunnery. She would die heartbroken the following autumn. Yoshitsune returned to the one place that felt like home, Hira Izumi. Yoshitsune left Hira Izumi as a young man seeking glory. He returned as a tired legend of Japan. The old Hidehira welcomed him and gave him a residence overlooking Hidehira's own. Somehow, his wife joined him here along with his newly born daughter. For a time, he lived in peace, but this did not last. Yoritomo controlled Japan, but he wanted all to bow to his power. He wanted Hira Izumi, and he wanted Yoshitsune dead. The old Hidehira was on his deathbed. He declared his eldest son, Yasuhira, his heir. He told him and his other son, Tadahira, to support Yoshitsune and give him command of their army. At the end of October 1187, the old man passed away. His sons were split in supporting Yoshitsune. The eldest kept control of the army. Throughout 1188, Yasuhira resisted every order from Yoritomo to arrest or kill Yoshitsune. But Yasuhira's loyalty was shaky at best, as Yoritomo threatened and prepared for an invasion of the city. In the first months of 1189, Yoritomo sent a letter to Yasuhira. If he killed Yoshitsune, his city and his people would be spared. The die was cast. On June 15th, 1189, hundreds of Yasuhira's warriors rode up to Yoshitsune's residence. Yoshitsune's companions, Benkei, Saburo, and Washino, prepared to defend their lord, their friend, their brother. They fought to the bitter end. First, Washino the hunter died, taking 5 enemies with him. Then it was Issei Saburo, the former bandit's turn. 9 warriors joined him in death. The last to fall, Benkei, the warrior monk who fought like a man possessed by a demon. With a sword and naginata in hand, he killed countless men and horses. Piles of severed heads laid around him. It took a storm of arrows and a slit to his throat to kill him. He was covered in arrows, and yet his body remained standing in death. As his friends died for him, Yoshitsune gathered his wife and daughter. Seppuku was his only choice. His family were the first to die. With his last breath, he ordered the house burned to the ground. One last defiance against his brother, an attempt to keep his head from the enemy. But fate made it so his head was collected and presented to Yoritomo. Months later, Ira-Izumi would be invaded regardless. Tadahira was killed in battle, and Yasuhira was betrayed and killed. Yoritomo's rise to power was complete, paved in the victories and blood of his brother, Yoshitsune. Yoshitsune's story ended that summer day in 1189, but the world he left and helped create would endure for centuries to come. The three shogunates would rule Japan until 1868. Yoshitsune's story was legendary, but it would take the work of the people to make it immortal. The tale of the Heike, first written between 1198 and 1227, gave Yoshitsune's story a prominent role in it. His fame, his legend would live on to this day. Many of the idealized notions of samurai came from Yoshitsune's depiction in that literature. Generations upon generations of samurai would read the Heike and look up to Yoshitsune. In time, the people's love of Yoshitsune made them create alternate ends to his story, from him becoming a king of Hokkaido to even becoming Genghis Khan of the Mongols. His story ended tragically, but even now, in 2025, his story is remembered. It has been retold, reimagined, and even inspiring within the media of today. From books and manga to movies and TV, and most importantly for today, in video games like Ghost of Tsushima. Looking at the lives of Yoshitsune and Jin, I see mirrored souls. They share much in common throughout their stories. To begin our comparison, we must look at their early lives. Yoshitsune was born in 1159. Jin, although not stated in the game, was best estimated to be born in 1249. This means the two were born nearly a century apart. Both were born into powerful samurai clans, the Minamoto and Sakai. Their mothers, Tokiwa and Chiyoko, were known for their compassion and their love for their children. Their clans took part in ending rebellions before their own demise, the Hojin and Yarikawa rebellions. Their fathers, Yoshitomo and Kazumasa, were great warriors driven by ambition and glory, and it was their chase for power and glory that led to their deaths in the Heijei Rebellion and the conquest of Iki, respectively. Their actions nearly destroyed their clans, leaving the Minamoto weak and the Sakai all but extinct. At the age of 7, both Yoshitsune and Jin would lose their mothers. Yoshitsune was taken away from his mother, never to see her again, and Jin's mother died of illness. With the loss of their parents, Yoshitsune and Jin would eventually be raised and trained by the lords of other samurai clans. These lords, Lord Fujiwara Hidehira and Lord Shimura, became Yoshitsune's and Jin's adoptive father figures. They trained them in the samurai way, and they both became excellent archers. Their early lives were shaped by war and tragedy. Their adult lives will be defined by it. The Genpei War for Yoshitsune and the Mongol invasion of Tsushima for Jin would be the catalyst for their legends. They both would face 4 major battles that not only heavily impacted their wars, but also their lives. The battles of Uji River and Komada Beach were their first taste of war. The battle for Yashima and the liberation of Castle Canada showed their clever tactics and adaptations to win. The battle for Ichi-no-Tani and Castle Shimura cemented their legends as the Minamoto hero and the ghost. Finally, the battle for Dan-no-Ura and Port Izumi marked the end of their wars. During these battles and other skirmishes, Yoshitsune and Jin both used deception, surprise attacks, and other morally questionable tactics to win these engagements. Not to mention the several duels they both participated in and won. Their relationships and companions during their stories also have a lot in common. Both would have a group of companions which varied in size during their stories that would prove to be invaluable to them. Both had a merchant that helped them during their escapes from Kurama Temple and Castle Shimura. The gold merchant and Kenji. Both had fearsome warrior monks at their sides that were willing to die for them, Benkei and Norio. Both had former bandits that were willing to go to any lengths to help win against their enemy, Saburo and Yuna. Both had skilled archers that were deadly at any range, Washino and Sensei Ishikawa. And both had a pair of siblings who were trained warriors, Yoshitsune's samurai brothers Tadanobu and Tsujinobu, and Jin's Yuna and Taka for the siblings' part, and Sensei Ishikawa and Lady Masako for the trained warriors' part. Not to mention their friendship between Yoshitsune, Benkei, and the samurai brothers compared to Jin's friendship with Ryuzo. Or how both Benkei and Ryuzo lost duels against Yoshitsune and Jin. The endings to their stories are even more similar. Despite everything they did for their lords, their defiance cost them their families. Yoritomo and Shimura betrayed Yoshitsune and Jin. They were branded traitors by their shoguns and would be hunted down for the rest of their days. Their titles, their lands and estates, and their homes were lost to them. They were forced into hiding. And although the people loved them, they were public enemy number one to their fellow samurai. We know how Yoshitsune's story ends, but Jin's is left open on purpose. Despite that, I very much believe that if Ghost of Tsushima did receive a direct sequel, that Jin's story could have easily ended in a similar tragic way with how the story concluded in the game. Obviously, their stories are different in many ways. Their wars are different, their time periods are different, their profound style of combat is different, how some of their similarities were caused were different. But I believe that it is within these similarities and differences that Yoshitsune's story was a blueprint, whether intentionally or not, for the creation of Jin Sakai's story and the world of Ghost of Tsushima. And because of how Yoshitsune's story from the Heike inspired or created many of the myths, tropes, and ideals of the romanticized samurai, that it would have influenced Ghost of Tsushima no matter what. Because Yoshitsune's story will forever be integrally linked to the samurai. And now, Jin Sakai's story will forever be tied not just to Yoshitsune's, but also the idea of samurai in video games. And of course, their shadow, the ghost. And with that, we conclude our bonus bookend series on Ghost of Tsushima. It has been an incredible journey, not just playing this game again, but also talking about its real history and inspirations, its story themes and game mechanics, and all the things that make me love this game. And now, it's over. Ghost of Tsushima can finally rest, as a new ghost story is waiting to be told. One chapter closes, another begins. Ghost of Yotei awaits. Until then, I hope you all enjoyed these bonus bookends as much as I did. Until next time, this is Ghost signing out.